Hello, Blitz fans of all ages, it's me, PlumCastle, and today we're going to be taking a look at the new tank bundles that came into the store, which are associated with this Contraband event that came out 2 days ago. I meant to cover this yesterday, something came up, so we'll be covering it today instead. I'm not going to be re-diving into this event. I do have the previous video, which I'll link in the description. But the main focus of today's video is actually the bundles that came out that were loosely associated with this event, and they start here. Or actually, they start a little bit above, they start here. Anyway, keep in mind each of these bundles are going to have a certain amount of these coupons. I'm not going to be specifying the exact amount in each one since that will be displayed on screen, but keep in mind that those will, again, help you with that previously mentioned event. Anyway, starting out is with, we're going to start with tier 10. Now, just keep in mind, even though some of these are lower tiers, there are some hidden gems in here, which I'll be going over. So starting with the Panzer 50T and Jaeger, I think would be the way to pronounce that, though I'm not entirely sure. From what I've heard, this tank is 50-50. I don't personally own the tank, however, judging by what one individual said as soon as they launched into a game with this tank, it's not exactly their favorite. And if we take a quick look at the stats, it's a medium, so hit points 1,800. I guess that's kind of okay. Damage per minute 3,000, so the damage per minute is cool. Reload time's also pretty fast. The thing with this tank, and I need to double check this here, is the armor. So let's check for the armor real quick here. It should be, there we go. The turret is 245, which, okay, that's fine. Some premium rounds are definitely going to go through that. Sides are 120, so yeah, Hesh is going to have no issue going through there. I don't know off the top of my head of a tank that has HE penetration like that, but the rear being 70, definitely everything's going to go through that. So overall, armor-wise, it's not the strongest. It does have a rounded turret, and what armor it does have, the top front, obviously, very, very sloped, so that's going to be pretty effective. Lower plates, not as sloped, so it's not going to be anywhere near as effective as the top. Plus, keep in mind that if you're going over a ridge and your tank is angled at all, that's going to make this front face even flatter, so it's definitely going to be pretty easy to hit. From what I can see on these stats, if you know what you're doing, it's going to be pretty decent, but you of course need to know what you're doing, and you have to be fairly comfortable with mediums. And because of how many tier 10s there are, you might find something in the tech tree that for you might be a little bit more comfortable than this particular tank. Anyway, the price, sitting at 18,500 gold, is the most expensive in this list, but as far as a tier 10 goes, I've definitely seen them as high as 20,000, so I guess technically it's on par, maybe a little bit cheaper than other tier 10s or other tanks in the tier. But that is a pretty hefty price nonetheless. As for whether it's worth it, I personally can't say for sure. Price to tier-wise, it's on par, but other than that, it looks like it could be a pretty decent tank, but I'm sure some people can struggle in this. Moving on to the WZ-11158. I know this at least at one time was Drool's favorite tank, if it's not still his favorite. It's not the best tier 10, I do know that. It's also 500 gold cheaper, and if we take a look at the stats, I'm surprised that this thing, as mentioned as it is, does not have PBR at this point, but whatever. Hit points, okay, it's a heavy, it's a tier 10 heavy, so it's going to have more hit points, 2,300. In terms of the damage per minute, it's 2,600, I'm just going to round that 2,600, pretty decent for a tier 10 heavy, I would say. Reload time, 10 seconds, I'd say that's kind of on par, maybe just a little bit faster than what we would normally see. Then again, this is not a Russian tank, this is a Chinese tank, so this is definitely going to have some differing characteristics when it comes to what I would at least normally expect of a heavy that looks like this. Average penetration, 260 on AP rounds, 303 on high explosive anti-tank or heat rounds, and then 65 on HE. Penetration value, average damage values for 40, 380, and 580 respectively. So, I mean, it seems like pretty average. Of course, like any tank, this one can be used very effectively. It can be used very not effectively. In terms of the armor, definitely some pretty decent armor. So like 240 on the front, and keep in mind this is sloped, so that's I'm assuming that's just the thickness itself, so slope, that's going to be more effective than that. The hull armor is 117, so I mean, it's definitely easy to penetrate, but it's definitely not as thin as the previous tank we looked at, but that makes sense. This is a heavy. Rear is 60, so yeah, you're going to be able to get some HE through there. Actually, you could be able to get a lot of HE if I'm being honest. Sides are 180 and 120. Given that the tracks cover a lot of the side, I would suspect that they can get a lot of troll shots. I don't know if this is spaced armor for sure. Either way, it's a tier 10 heavy. It's going to get the job done. Is it the best? No, it's not, but it's definitely not the worst in the tier for 18,000. I don't usually, off the top of my head, I don't usually see this come out for less, so from a collecting standpoint, that may be totally worth it. Am I going to get it? Amount of gold aside, I would not personally go for this. Is not something that I'm looking for, but somebody might be. And then we have the T22, which I'm going to be a little bit honest, was super overpowered when it came out. However, at this point, it's good, but that's about as far as it goes because everything else has kind of gotten stronger around it, and I think this might have actually received a bit of a nerf at one point. At the very least, it was a balance change. But it is the T22 Medium. This is a very well-known, popular tank, especially from, I think, what was it, like update 5.0 or something that this came out. It's a medium. It's got some very troll armor, very good armor. From the front, it's almost like heavy armor, 227 millimeters. The lower hull, 110, which is ever so slightly thinner. I think the other one was 111 or 110, so on par again with a heavy. Very sloped lower plate. The sides are 170 and it's saying 170 and 80. I'm assuming the 170 is probably the turret and the 80 is the hull, though it doesn't. Sure enough, I was not looking at that list right. So yeah, 170 on the turret and 80 on the hull. There is something very unique about the side armor on this because when I do run up against these, it's very common to get a troll bounce off the side of the armor because oftentimes these guys can turn around really quick, and that armor becomes very effective with how much that they can slope it. Turning speed, which should be around here somewhere, reverse, so 56 forward, 20 reverse, whole turn rate 50, and yeah, so this tank turns around pretty quickly, so it's maneuverable to say the least. In terms of damage per minute, 2,000, it's just shy of 3,000, so very cool there. Reload time 6.2 seconds, so it's a very strong tank. It is not quite the overpowered tank that it was at one point, but it is still a pretty good contender. And considering that this is the least expensive tier 10, I would say that price for value, the T22 might actually be the best out of the tier 10s. Granted, I've not actually owned any of these three, but I have experience playing against them as well as other people who have reviewed them. So I would say, at least with my experience, I would say the T22 is probably the best of the tier 10. But that may differ depending on your personal preferences. After that, we have the Cobra. Now, the Cobra was an interesting tank, a very weird looking one that I reviewed. I can be reviewing these with the camos on. That's cool. A tank that I had a leak video for at one point, and so now we have it. I think it came out already, but this is, I believe, a tier 9, and unfortunately looking at the camo does not give me the stats. So yeah, tier 9, and it is a medium. Hit points, 1,700. I'm just going to go quickly through here. So from what I've heard, it's not like the best tank ever. Average damage, or damage per minute, 2,200 roughly. You could definitely get that to about 2,200 with some provisions and stuff. Reload time is basically 11 seconds. Average damage for heat rounds, so it looks like this only has 2 rounds, heat rounds and high explosive. You're going 400 and 500 respectively. Aiming times 3.8, dispersion, yeah, it's definitely not the most accurate. Overall, I would say, at least on paper, of the 3 tanks we're looking at, this is probably the most interesting looking, but probably not the best playing. And if we take a look at the price, it is 15,500, which is, you know, like 2,000 gold cheaper than the tier 10. But for me, at least, what I'm looking at, there's nothing that screams like this is going to be a terribly amazing tank, though I could be wrong. And as I should also mention, if you do own these tanks and you have your own opinion, you can feel free to put those down in the comments, because yeah, the likelihood of me being able to review every single tank and actually owning them is pretty low, but I do definitely own some in here, and we're getting up to some of the good ones, because we're now dropping down into the next category, which is the Panzer 70 Cavalry. Now, I do not own this. I'm tempted to try to figure out how to scrape up the gold for that. I have a few different things that I could probably exchange for it. It looks cool. It's definitely, I think this is like it's obviously post World War II tank. It's definitely a more modern one. Very high alpha. A lot of people really like this. The armor on it's really good. 2,000 hit points. Damage per minute is 2,000, so I mean, we're not talking like crazy or anything, but it's still pretty decent. It's got a longer reload time, 16.6 seconds. And then average penetration for the APCR, which is actually the standard round, the heat round, which is the premium, and then the high explosive. Those are respectively 245 millimeter, 310, and 90. And then in terms of damage, again, respectively, that would be 560, 490, and 640. So definitely some decent alpha. Really hits hard unless you miss, and then you gotta wait 16.5 seconds plus just to be able to shoot the next round. Top speed forward 40, reverse 15. Gun depression 7 degrees, so I mean, it's definitely a heavy tank for sure. It is a German heavy tank, and it can be very effective, it can be not. I get the feeling this is a pretty decent tank that is fun to play, so from that standpoint, I would say this is pretty cool. At 12,500, I have seen some, now granted, this was like close to when those tier 8s launched. I've seen tier 8s for about this expensive before, so the fact that this is for 2,500, granted, this is an older tank. It's been around for a while, so the price being lower is pretty much expected. But I would say that's probably not too bad. I've seen these been running around for a few days because of this event, and yeah, it is a pretty cool looking tank at the very least. After that, we have the AMX. Okay, I know people get like super annoyed apparently when you say oneer, but the AMX 30 oneer prototype. I don't know what that oneer means. Perhaps someone can shed some light on that. But as you can see, I do own this tank. Judging by the checkmark, it's not my favorite. I would say I pretty much never play it. I got it for free, but I pretty much never play it. I guess it can work. It's a tier 9. It can be effective. It's just for me, I don't enjoy it. It's not really my play style. It gets taken out pretty easily. As you can see, hit points 1,600 for tier 9. I mean, it's not a heavy or anything, but it would have been nice to maybe have a little bit more than that, judging by how quickly these things can absolutely fall apart. Damage per minute, though, 6,000 damage per minute. That would be insane. That would make this OP, no matter how low the hit points were. But damage per minute, 2,600. Reload time, 7.15 seconds. Average penetration, 232 for APCR, 263 for APC. So, I misspoke. 232 millimeters for AP rounds, 263 for APCR, and 50 for high explosive. Average damage, we're looking at 310, 260, and 350. Again, in that same order of AP, then APCR, and then high explosive. So yeah, I mean, it's a medium tank. It's a French medium tank, so that basically means not a whole lot of armor. The turret is the strongest part in the front, sitting at 165, which still is honestly going to be able to get shot through pretty easily in most cases. So yeah, not a lot of armor, not a lot of hit points, kind of like okay damage per minute. It's not what I would consider fantastic. And that's also probably why it's priced at a slightly expensive tier 8, because it's just not super fantastic, especially if you're down tier and you're going against tier 10s. It's not going to exactly be fun. There are some people that can be very effective, but then again, there are people that can be effective in some of the worst tanks in the game, so that's not really saying a whole lot. I would say overall, not really one that I'd go for, especially given that I have this one and definitely know it's not like super great. Next after that, we're getting to a really nice tank, the Progetto 46. Well, that's just the camo, the Seeker's the camouflage, but the Progetto 46. I have this tank also, very fun tank. So it's an auto reloader, which means that it has a clip, but instead of reloading the whole clip, you can reload each shot individually, which it brings in a very interesting gameplay. It can take some getting used to, but it is a very nice tank, very good. Hit points obviously aren't like super high. However, a thing that is not really reflected in the armor that it's showing here is this tank will actually troll some shots on occasion, despite how thin it is. And I think it mainly has to do with the fact that there's like spaced armor on this thing. Of course, it can be HE'd in the back, and it can be completely destroyed if you don't play it right. But you would be surprised how many bounces you can get off a gun mantlet, because when you're going over a hill, you're of course mostly just seeing the turret. So a bounce is definitely going to happen from time to time, and I really do like this tank. Now, because it is a magazine, or more specifically an auto-reloading magazine, its damage per minute isn't exactly the best, sitting at 2,272. But what it does allow you to do is get one shot off at a time. Granted, it's at a very bad damage per minute, but you can technically do that. So it gives you a few more options when it comes to what's going on. So, for example, let's say the game's going bad and you're fairly low hit points on this thing. If you are a normal magazine and you're not reloaded, you're toast. However, this one, you can sometimes get off one, maybe even two last effort shots out of this tank. So sometimes it can actually result in some last minute damage that you couldn't with some other tanks. So that aspect is pretty cool, I would say. The reload times on each shell is a bit different. The first shell, when you are down to 0, is 6.34 seconds, and then the other two are just shy of 5 seconds. So it's longer to reload the first one. So basically, in an ideal situation, you're probably only wanting to shoot 2 shells at a time, but I mean, I never do that. I always just shoot 3 if the opportunity arises, but then don't if it doesn't require it. But it just gives you some options in terms of what you want to do with the game in particular. Average penetration for its standard, premium, and HE rounds are 194, 272, which is actually pretty good, and then 49 respectively. Now, the average damage for the AP rounds is 240, so this is when you completely unload the clip. Let's see, that's 40, 120, and then that would be like 920, I think. Let's just double check that, because sometimes my math is a little bit off sometimes, so times 3. So I was incorrect. I figured something was amiss there. 720 damage, which is actually pretty good for a tier 8 medium getting out of its entire clip. And yeah, it's a fairly decent tank. It's not like the fastest medium or anything, but 55, that's pretty good. Reverse is 20, so it's maneuverable, and I would definitely say it's one of my more favorite tier 8s. I would say it goes so far as to say it's probably my favorite tier 8 medium. I do believe I've seen it cheaper than 10,000. So in that aspect, it's probably not super great. I don't recall seeing the camouflage before, though, so that may be why the price is a bit higher. Either way, pretty good tank. And it'll be kind of up to you whether you want to go for the 10,000, which it does frequently come out for that price, I think. But then I'm pretty sure I've seen it for 8,000. But then again, maybe that was without a camo, so that's another thing to keep in mind. Then we've got the KPZ RH Spooky. Well, the Spooky is just it's the KPZ 07RH. I feel like I did a leak video for this tank before, or I was going to, and I don't think it's terribly... Ooh, those are not a lot of hit points. So for a tier 8, granted it's a medium, but 1,345 hit points, that's not a ton. Damage per minute is only 2,300. Armor damage or penetration in the same order as I've been going through. 218, 262, 65 damage is 240, 200, and then 320 for the different shell types. That just doesn't seem terribly fantastic. Now, forward speed 60, cool, and then 20 in reverse. Okay, it's fast. Armor. Okay, it has more armor than I would have anticipated. I still don't think it's going to really help you a whole lot. Side armor, 100. Okay, some HE rounds are going to go through that, but that may be a fairly big deterrent for most HE rounds. 100 on the side. Like I said, rear 40 and 60, and yeah, the turret's of course the strongest in the front, sitting at 180. Overall, this doesn't scream terribly fantastic to me, and at 10,000, I would say, just looking at the stats, again, not owning the tank, but looking at the stats, I would say that's probably not super fantastic. The SCOTA T56, I have this tank. I'm not quite sure about it. I hear some people say it's really good, and from my personal experience, it's kind of just been decent. Hit points are pretty good. It has a surprisingly long reload. I was not anticipating that when I got the tank initially. 15 plus seconds to reload, and then you're only, like, assuming you're shooting AP rounds, that's 450 damage. I mean, that's cool. It just does take a good minute to actually reload, and the dispersion's not, like, super fantastic at 0.389. So, I mean, it definitely works. It's a heavy tank, and it's a tier 8 premium heavy tank, so generally speaking, they're pretty good. For the price, maybe I just don't know about like 9,500. Like if this was like 8,000, I'd say yeah, that's like totally worth it. For 9,500, that would probably be more than I'd be willing to spend. But yeah, I mean it's a decent tank. I would say it's not my favorite, but I can definitely say that it can be used very effectively, and it's not by like the top 0.1% of players that can actually play the tank. It can be played well. It's just not personally my favorite, but I could see somebody potentially wanting that. And then we get to a really good one, and this tank falls into the category of one of my most favorite tanks in my entire garage. Now let's see, if you buy this, so just to show you, for example, I already have the Action 10. I don't have that camouflage, though. I would really like to have that camouflage, but that would mean at 9,000 gold, and my return on that would be 3,750. So let's just be generous and say that, pretend like that's 4,000. That would be over 5,000 gold for the one camouflage. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a cool camouflage. It's just not worth that much. As for the tank itself, though, absolutely fantastic. Hit points, 1,750. Damage per minute for a heavy is, like, insane, 2,518. Average penetration, 244 for AP rounds, which is, honestly, like, pretty good for, especially the caliber of the gun. 271 for APCR, and then 45 for high explosive. So, yeah, HE is not going to go through much aside from maybe, like, an RHM or something. But it is very good on the other two shell types. Now, as far as the damage goes, 190 for AP rounds, 160, so it's not like super, super high, but 160 for APCR, and then 250 for explosive, if you somehow manage to get a penetration with that. All in all, it's very good reload time, 4.53 seconds. I really, really like this tank. Armor's pretty decent too, as you can see, the turret, 254 in the front, and then sides, 152, and then the rear's 95. Mostly, when it comes to HE, you're only really needing to worry about the back of the tank here. In some rare cases, like maybe Hesh or something, you might find someone go through the side of your turret in like a specific spot. But overall, the main thing you need to worry about is just that little hatch on the top, which, if you're running against an enemy that's not very good and definitely not used to your tank, it's probably not going to be a problem. But there's enough players that know to shoot for this, and if you're good, you can actually hit it a lot of the time. And then the very top of the turret is, even though it's sloped, it can get cut through. So that's just something to keep in mind. Overall, though, very good. Speeds, 36 forward, 12 reverse. It's just a good tank. And for 9,000, especially considering that you'd be getting this camo, if you don't have this tank already, I would say, yeah, that's probably worth it. I think I got mine for 8,000, but again, that was without the camo, so it's just a completely empty tank aside from whatever camouflage I put on it. So with the camouflage, 9,000, I could totally get behind that. And then I need to go through these a little quicker, it looks. The TS60 Dignity, well, the TS60, it's a tank destroyer. It came out like a year or two ago for 4th of July, I think. Memory's a little rusty on this particular tank. It's a heavy tank. I take that back. I just said it was a tank destroyer, and then I called it a heavy tank for some reason. No, tank destroyer, yeah, hit points kind of stink. 1,300. Damage per minute, 2,500. 2,500, almost 2,600. I'll give it a little bit of a generous round there. Reload time 8 seconds. Yeah, there's just nothing for this particular tank that's standing out to me. Even compared to the previous tank, which was a heavy tank, sure, but given how rounded this tank is, I would anticipate some decent armor, but it doesn't really look like it has like terribly fantastic armor, especially when you compare it in juxtaposition to the Action 10, which just had incredible armor. This tank, not so much. It's also a tank destroyer, which means for my playstyle, I would probably hate this tank because there's very few tank destroyers that I actually like, so it's pretty hard to get into that Plum likes it category. But it is a tank destroyer. Some people love tank destroyers. It's an American tank destroyer. Honestly, given how good the American tank destroyers are in the tech tree, I'm not really sure this is all that important. So I would say for me, yeah, not really sure I'd really go with this. Again, mentioning the fact that there's some very, very good tank destroyers in the American tech tree, which are just completely for free, and you don't need to spend any gold. So I'd say, for me, that's a pass. We then have the Bassante C45. Now, this is a European nation. I've seen these floating around. It's cheaper than some of the previous ones we were looking at. Not exactly a cool-looking tank, if you ask me. It looks a little bit, reserve shell. So what's this? Okay, so this is like an auto reloader, I think is how it works, but it's like on reserve shell, so like you can totally use it. It's just that last shell is like ridiculously long to reload. Let's check here. So armor, it's definitely not the thickest, especially for a tier 8 heavy, with the thickest area being 180 on the turret. Damage sprint 2,000, 178. Okay, it's a heavy. I guess that's understandable. Here's what I mean about that reserve shell. So it has 2 shells, which is not a lot. The first shell is 17.26 seconds to reload. Just one shell. And mind you, if you shoot that and it's an AP round, you're getting a whopping 310 damage. That's not a lot. So yeah, definitely so it's an auto reloader, but my goodness, you basically only want to be shooting this as a single round tank. Otherwise, you're just spending 17 seconds, and that's going to absolutely tank your already not super fantastic damage per minute. Yeah, for me, just looking at that alone, not really all that appealing. I'm going to say this is probably another pass, at least in my opinion, looking at it on paper. I mean, if you have the camouflage on it, I guess it looks kind of cool, but the stats just don't look super fantastic to me. Moving on to the Konan Yagu Panzer 105. This is a pretty decent tank destroyer. It's not a ton of armor. It only has hull armor. Makes sense. I mean, it's a tank destroyer without a turret. As you can see, HE is going to be able to go through the sides, the rear, and potentially even the front, despite the fact that this looks like this would have some angled armor. It can get cut through fairly easily. 2,400 average damage, 3,500 damage for its APCR rounds, which are its standard. It drops down to 300 for the premium rounds and then 400 for HE. Penetration values in that same order, 255, and then it goes up to a little bit to 300 and then down to 53 again. Overall, basically, when I see people playing this tank, it's very effective when unspotted and doing a understandable tank destroyer thing and sitting in a bush high up on a mountain somewhere. One map that comes into mind, I forget the name because I don't really pay attention, but I'll show a picture of it right now. This map in particular does seem to be a fairly good one for it, especially along these ridges. But yeah, I mean, this tank on that map, especially with its playstyle, can be pretty good. Basically, any map that's going to allow you the same kind of abilities is going to be pretty good. Overall, though, it's definitely going to be one of your more like higher skill level players that's going to be going after this one. It is cheaper than some of the other ones, so this one's split. If you're good at tank destroyers, I would say it's probably going to be a pretty decent one. If you're not good at tank destroyers, I would probably suggest to just stray away from that one because it, again, can have some major issues with that armor. T2020. If I understand correctly, this might have gotten buffed. But it's, from what I also understand, a pretty garbage tank. Just nothing really going for it. I mean, just like typical USSR tank. And yeah, hit points 1,750. And armor, it's not the thickest. And then average damage 400. Yeah, I mean, given that we have the IS-5 for being in a decent clan, but being only like 1,500 gold. The IS-6 also, and then you've got just the tier 8 IS tanks or something similar to that in the tech tree. I would say that those ones alone kind of make this one a bit meaningless to me. Especially this one's a taller tank than the other ones. So yeah, this one I would say is a pass, even though it is cheaper than some of the other ones. And then we have the G-SOAR 1008. This one is really, it's kind of like the tier 8 version of the Death Star in some ways, but it has a clip. So hit points, not very many. It's like 1,150, not much. Damage per minute, 2,300. Average damage is like 350. Now there are two high explosive rounds. One's heat rounds and one's high explosive. The heat rounds, or not heat rounds, I'm sorry, the HESH rounds. HESH rounds are 170 millimeters of penetration, which if you catch somebody on their side, you're probably going to be able to go through, which means 440 damage. Times that by the 2 shells it has, and that is 880 damage if they both go through. So it's pretty nasty when this thing gets both shots through. Otherwise, you know, like 350 and 350, that's giving you like a 700 damage, which is still not terribly fun. Definitely better than the 880. But yeah, it's it can work for its HESH rounds. Pretty decent. I mean, those are definitely the highlight of the tank. There's some other stats I could go over, but the HESH rounds are definitely the highlight of this tank. For memes and for fun, 8,000 gold, I could see that. I think that's probably a just asking price. After that, we have the Som Grenadier. Now, I don't see too many people play this, but it has some surprisingly good armor, which is saying a lot because it's a French tank. And French, for whatever reason, don't know what armor is most of the time when it comes to these tanks. So the fact that this has armor and some pretty decent armor at that. For example, the front of the turret, 200 millimeters. What French tank has 200 millimeters of armor? That's actually kind of insane. I don't know why I don't really see these get played a whole lot. As you can see, some of the stats here are actually like fairly decent. I don't know why I keep hitting this truck in the back, just trying to turn the camera around. Hit points, 1,800. I'd say that's pretty decent. Damage per minute. So, if everything went perfectly the way it's supposed to, you could kill one of the Soma SM with another Soma SM in exactly a minute. Well, give or take, because, you know, that's just damage per minute, so that's on average. But your average damage is the same as your hit point pool, 1,800. Magazine reload time, it's pretty long, 25 seconds. Shell reload, so like the reload between those shells is 3 seconds. So it takes a total of 6 seconds to get your 3 shells out. Each one of those, if they're AP rounds, 310. So 310, and that goes to 620, and then 930 if you get them all in, which is a hefty amount of damage. And coupled with the fact that it has some pretty decent armor, makes this tank a bit formidable. Add to that the fact that its gun depression is 10. Aside from like the long reload time, I don't really know why I don't see too many of these floating around out there. Maybe there's something I'm just missing, but looking at this looks like a fairly decent tank. I'm sure, of course, like any tank, it has weak points. So if we look again, sides are bad, rear can get HE, but I mean, that's like the story of most tanks. So yeah, I mean, it's a magazine tank. Now granted, if I had to choose between this and an Emil 1, I would probably go with the Emil 1 because of the smaller footprint, and I'm sure some of the other stats are better. But this does actually seem like it would be a fairly decent tank especially given that a lot of the times the people I see playing them are pretty good, and I struggle against this tank, even though I technically know where its weak points are. 750 gold for a tier 8 that has that much armor. I would say, just going off of an assumption and looking at the numbers, I think that's probably fine. After that, the FV201. I think I have this tank. Oh, I don't have this tank. I could have sworn I had this tank. I'm not sure what happened there, but yeah, I mean, I really don't see a whole lot of these getting played. Wow, the graphics are so outdated on this. I guess they were on the last tank too, but yeah. 1,500 hit points. It's heavy. It's a tier 7 though, so I mean we can be a little bit forgiving there because this is a tier 7. Damage per minute, pretty nice, 2,600. Armor, it's so-so. Front of the turret's like 152. That's the strongest. Everywhere else kind of averaging between 50 and 90. So damage per minute is good. Your damage per round is not like super fantastic. It's like 160, which I mean a lot of tier 7s have that. But 160 damage, so high damage per minute. Armor, I definitely go through these pretty easy. And the penetration values, it's not like super high on the AP rounds. The APCR definitely gives you some more, but that's also going to drop you to 135 damage per shell. So yeah, I mean, like, there's some things about it that are good, some things about it not so great. I get the feeling that this is probably just like a really middle-of-the-road tank. It's good, and that's about where I would probably leave that. 5,000. That is substantially cheaper than the previous tank, so maybe it's worth it. For me, I would not really go for it. It's tier 7, and tier 7's already like so full of tanks that are like way more overpowered than this one. So yeah, I would say but it could be good. So I'm undecided. That maybe not. Super Hellcat Delta. I've heard people say that this tank is really good. Every time I go against one of these, now granted maybe this is because I'm up tiered or I'm playing better tanks, but I absolutely squash them into the ground. I have actually yet to run into a case where I didn't absolutely decimate one of these with HE. It's a Hellcat. It's just a tier 7 version. It's got like basically no hit points. I'm sure 1,100. Congratulations, 3 HE rounds later and you're probably going to be dead. Yeah, and the armor everywhere is just paper thin. I mean, the hull is like 25 millimeters everywhere, and then the turret's a little bit stronger. But when you've got the whole hull, the entire hull to look at, why would you even shoot in the turret unless it was the side? So yeah, not a lot of armor. Period. Now, damage per minute is 2,600 roughly, so that's good. Very fast damage. Basically, if you're going to play this tank and you want this tank, you really got to make sure you find a good bush with some hard cover that you can escape to. Otherwise, you're going to get destroyed in, on average, probably about 3 to 5 seconds of being spotted. Just being honest. If you get 3 people looking at you and they have HE loaded, or if they're just higher caliber tanks, that 1,100 hit points is going to disappear in a flash. Penetration 182 AP rounds, APCR is 243, so decent premium penetration. But yeah, I mean, it can be effective, like I said, with probably every other tank in this list. So just moving forward, like, it can be played well. But yeah, this one is a very tough one. Again, I hear people raving about this tank and how good it is, but for me, I don't know what it is, but I really do not struggle taking this thing out at all. Now, if you were tier 6, that would be a different story. That would be a little bit difficult to deal with one of these if they knew what they were doing. So there is that to consider as well. It is more expensive than this other one. Again, the Hellcat's newer, and maybe there's something I'm missing about this one. This one just seems kind of like middle of the road. But this one, skilled players pretty much only. If you're not very comfortable with this kind of tank, especially if you're not comfortable with a Hellcat to start with, you're probably not going to be super comfortable with this tank either. Which then leads me to the Steyr WT. And I do have this. I don't love it, and I've got to say, if you are not in the top 10% of players with tank destroyers, you're probably not going to like this. Its hit points are even worse than the previous one. Its armor's even worse. I mean, its thickest area is 20 millimeters. Like, I would totally go the Hellcat over this. Damage per minute on this is also worse. The damage per shell's worse, too. I mean, okay, 7 degrees of gun depression. It is a magazine tank, so that's part of why its gun depression isn't... its damage per minute isn't super great, but yeah. There's really nothing about this tank that I could say, oh yeah, that's great. It's German made, but yeah, it's not fantastic. Especially given at 5,500, like, given that we have two very thinly armored tank destroyers at the same price, at the same tier, it's absolutely no question that if you're going to get one of these two, it's the Hellcat. The Steyr is just, no. I mean, sure, you can get the Jaguar. Oh, that doesn't even look good. It just looks like an avocado. It actually does look like an avocado, especially if you like leave it on the counter for a little while and those cracks start to show up. But yeah, it no good. After that, though, we have the TOG 2, which I'm actually genuinely confused why they're even selling this, given that they literally gave us the Blastroid completely for free like 2 weeks ago or something like that. Maybe it's a little longer than 2 weeks, but not that long ago. And now they're trying to sell us essentially the same tank. 2,500 though, if you don't have the TOG or the Blastroid, I guess that's fine. I'm not really going to go too much into the tank. It's the hot dog tank, or more specifically, the hot TOG tank. But yeah, it's a big meme. It can be very effective. It's an absolute beast with its hit points at this tier, which is tier 6. Damage per minute, 1,854, which again, for a tier 6 heavy is pretty decent. But yeah, overall, decent tank. These things are quite common, and given that it's tier 6, 2,500, I'd say that's, if you want to get that, that's totally fine. I don't see any issue with that whatsoever. Then we've got the Type 64, which is another tank that does not have much armor whatsoever. Oh my goodness. Its maximum is 25 millimeters, and it's on the turret. Again, if you got the front to look at, you're going through. You got the back, you're going through. At the side, okay, then you can look at the turret, and, well, I mean, it's got basically no armor. Either way, if you got HE and you're shooting at this, aside from like some weird condition or hitting the tracks, you're probably gonna get full damage for it. Hit points, 900. That does mean that because this is a tier 6 and KV2s exist in tier 6, not only that, but the SU-152 exists in tier 7, you could literally be a one-shot. And that is never fun. Now, this has, what's this ability? Concealment and movement. So basically, while you're moving, concealment doesn't decrease. I mean, that's cool. But the moment you get spotted, you've got issues. So that part doesn't really help too much, aside from like not getting spotted in the first place. Damage per minute, 1,500. The TOG was honestly higher, and it was a heavy tank, and this is a light tank. Same tier. So like, this is not getting worse. It's just not as good of a tier 6. Reload time, 6 seconds. Okay. Damage for AP rounds, 160. I mean, this is like the typical, whatever caliber gun this is. The typical damages are like 60 for standard rounds, 135 for APCR, and then like 200 on high explosive. This is like a number set that I see quite a few times. Yeah. I think it's fast, though. Yeah, like 72 kilometers per hour forwards, 23 in reverse. So it's fast. But the TOG was less expensive and was better. Sure, it's slower, but I would definitely go the TOG over that. And then that brings us to Liberton Panther, a tank that I own, and it's okay. There's really nothing outstandingly bad or outstandingly good about it. It just exists. I think I got it for free now that I think about it. It was like a super low drop chance, and I might have even done it on stream once. It was pretty interesting. It's just a tier 6 Panther, but I mean, not quite the tier 7 Panther, because the tier 7 Panther is a strong tank, and this one's not, per se. I mean, 1,800 damage per minute, okay. Like I said, with the previous tank, now this might be a different caliber, but I'm telling you, tier 6 has a lot of this. Same damage numbers. standard rounds, 160, premium, 135, high explosive, 200. Reload time, 5.4. So it's actually got a faster reload time. And given that it does have more armor, and let's see, and more hit points, almost 1,100. I would say of the two, I already have the Liberton Panther, of course, but if I had to pick between these two, just looking at it, I go the Liberton Panther. Even though the Liberton Panther is like not my favorite, but I'd go the TOG over all three of those. So that is now all the tanks. And so, even though this video is way longer than I was anticipating at first, we are now just going to, or at least I'm going to go through and point out the 3 major ones in here. 3 or 4, it really depends. There are some good tanks in here. So big ones for me would, of course, be the T22. That's for the tier 10s. I think that's probably the best one out of the bunch. The cavalry is a very nice tank. And then for sure the Action 10 out of this whole list. I would say the Action 10 is probably the best option. And then some lesser ones would be like the Soma, might be interesting. And then the TOG 2 for tier 6 fans. Other than that, the rest of them kind of vary, but at any rate, that is all of the tanks. And so with that, I hope you all enjoyed, and as always, have fun, good luck, and happy tanking.